Right, well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's Carbon Experts live webinar. My name's Samuel Boswell. I'm from One Click LCA, the global leader in software for EPDs and LCAs. So our mission is to make sustainability simple, reliable, and scalable for manufacturers. And today's session will be divided into three key sections. So first, we'll cover the most frequently asked questions manufacturers have about the EPD process. Then we'll dive into how combining expert consultancy with automation can streamline EPD creation, boost accuracy, and even help you win contracts. Finally, we'll talk through a real-world case study brought to you by or brought by Blue Marble, showcasing how they tackled a complex project with a tight deadline and the results that were achieved. So I'm excited to be joined by Sam McGarrick, Head of Advisory at Blue Marble. So Sam and his team provide expert guidance on LCAs, EPDs, and regulatory compliance, helping manufacturers navigate challenges, accelerate their processes, and improve data quality. So today, he'll share how Blue Marble's hybrid approach of consultancy and digital tools deliver real impact. So please do feel free to ask any questions in the chat throughout the session. So we're here to make this as useful and as interactive as possible. But now we'll go on, and Sam, you can introduce yourself a little bit more, and then also introduce Blue Marble.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks very much for that introduction, Samuel. Yeah, I'll just say a few words about Blue Marble to start. So. Yeah, we're an environmental consultancy based in the UK with our headquarters in Exeter in the southwest. I'm head of advisory, which is effectively our professional services division. Just in terms of who we work with then, so at the moment we're split into three main divisions. We have the professional services advisory division. We have a division that's focused on producing digital tools. So these are bespoke platforms, producing software with a particular focus on the insurance sector. So there's a couple of clients for us there. And we also have a division that's focused on larger contracts with a particular focus on the education sector. So we've got a large contract with the Department for Education. The division that I'm responsible for, the advisory, we do a range of services, mainly focused around life cycle assessment. So we've got a number of clients. So some of the ones that I mentioned there, Optibac is a manufacturer of probiotics, Neuron manufacture and operates electric scooters. Frobisher's is a soft drinks brand. It's almost kind of could be mind-bendingly broad, the different, the potential different clients that we could work with to produce life cycle assessment. And we also produce environmental product declarations, which is what we're talking about today. So this is mainly within the construction industry. And when we're producing EPDs, we use One Click LCA's EPD tool, which is something that we're going to discuss today. And then in terms of the types of construction products we've conducted LCA on, you can see here's a list of some of them. It kind of goes from kind of least complex with the recycled soil and aggregates all the way through to electric showers, solar panels, things like that. So really it's anything that could go on or into a building that we could potentially conduct life cycle assessment on to produce EPDs. So yeah, those are my intro slides, intro to Blue Marble there.
Brilliant, thank you. So moving on from that, we're going to quickly get the audience to interact a little bit. So here we are asking a poll. And so what is your biggest challenge when creating EPDs? And so Of course, for those of you who have created an EPD, then please put the relevant answer in. But also for those who haven't, but maybe have kind of begun the process of trying to get into producing EPDs, it would be also interesting to understand any kind of challenges that you've come into or come across. And so the options are lack of expertise in LCA and EPDs, difficulty in gathering accurate data, meeting regulatory requirements. The process takes too long. It's a high cost. And the last option, which would be you're unsure where to start. Okay. Right. So I'll just quickly double check. Okay. So in regards to the results, sorry, I just realized I had to do the poll as well to get the results. So difficulty in gathering accurate data is making up the largest portion. So that's about 42%. Consider that. Also unsure where to start. That makes a lot of sense. It's a technical subject, and so that's making up about 20%, 19% there. And then lack of expertise comes in at number 3 at 17% for the results. So what we're going to do now is we are going to move on to the section of the most common questions from manufacturers, and this will be a kind of Q&A section, and we'll be able to go through some of the typical things that are asked. So the first question that we're going to have is, now we will move on. Is when manufacturers approach you. So Sam, for you, when manufacturers approach you about EPDs, what's the first question that they're going to normally ask you?
Okay, so I suppose it ties into the poll question of yes, unsure where to start, really, which is the first question we get all the time is, how many EPDs do I need? And what we do with any new inquiries, we hold what we call a discovery call.
Yeah,
and it's a short call, takes no more than about 30 minutes, and we start to build an EPD strategy for the manufacturer, so that they can understand, or that they can start to answer that question, how many EPDs they need. In order to answer that question, you have to understand what a declared unit is, and I'll just quickly touch on that. So, declared unit is the unit to which all the data in the EPD document relates, and that might be a square meter of product. It could be a kilogram of product. It could be a cubic meter product. It could be one unit. And the thing with a declared unit is it's very sensitive. So take, for example, you had a square meter of a product which came in a certain thickness. If you change the thickness of that product at all, the results would also change in the EPD document. So the ideal position really is that you have an EPD per product. And this can be a challenge for manufacturers who produce hundreds of products. And so part of our service up front is to try and understand what options are available. And for some manufacturers, the right option is to produce an EPD per product. It's highly accurate that way. It's a good strategy to take. For other manufacturers, there are other options. So you could perhaps look at averaging an EPD. You could do an EPD with a scaling table. So an average would be, say you've got 2 thicknesses, you do an average of those 2. There's a disadvantage in that it's a average of 2. It's not representative of either one. Or you could take a worst case scenario, which that'd be a conservative position to take. So that would be quite a that's probably one of the first things that we try and establish is how many EPDs a manufacturer needs, and help to build that strategy. I think another question that we always get asked, very understandably, is how much does it cost? And there are cost implications to it. There's no doubt about that. Whether you use a consultant, or whether you take a license for software like One Click LCA and you do the LCA in-house, there are cost implications. The way to look at it, though, I would say, is if you think that an EPD is, in most cases, it would be valid for 5 years, particularly if you're doing, for example, an average EPD with multiple products. If you look at it as the cost per product per year, you'll actually find it's probably not as expensive as you think. And actually, if you think about, what is an EPD? It's a document with some tables, a whole load of numbers in, but really what that is it's environmental data, and the document is rich with environmental data. And you've got to think, over the course of 5 years, are you likely to be asked for the carbon footprint of your product, or the water footprint of it, or the recycled content of it, or the recyclability of it, or the embodied energy? An EPD will tell you all of that. And so it's an investment for sure, but it's also an asset. And I think that's an important way to look at it. So those are probably the two main things that we get asked at the start.
Absolutely, yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, it's an asset over the next 5 years, because undoubtedly all of this stuff's continually becoming more relevant. So going back slightly, I have a question which is kind of more directly connected to the poll. So I suppose it's a twofold question. Firstly, would you say that the results are surprising to you? And so just to quickly reiterate what the top three are. So difficulty gathering accurate data, unsure where to start, and then a lack of expertise in LCA. What would you say the biggest challenges manufacturers face, or what the biggest challenges are that manufacturers face when they're creating EPDs?
So one of them, I think, was difficulty gathering
data. Yeah, that was number one. Yeah, at 44%.
Yeah, So I would say, I'd say that probably the LCA part is the most complex part of it. But as a consultant, we're kind of, that's the part that we run, and with One Click LCA, as we'll come on to today, it's made that process much more streamlined than it used to be. But the data gathering, the primary data gathering, is probably the most time-consuming part of it, the most challenging part of it. It's the part that the manufacturer has to have most involvement with. But we'll talk today about how we make that process as easy as possible for manufacturers. And I'd say as well that it's challenging, but if the primary goal of the exercise is to produce an EPD document, one of the kind of, I would say, very helpful, valuable byproducts of the exercise is once you gather that data, you've got really good supply chain transparency. So it's certainly valuable from that side.
Great. Okay. And so moving on to the next question is, which I think again leads on quite nicely, are there common misconceptions about EPDs and LCAs that you often come across?
Yes. So probably one of them is that it has to take a long time. I think, as I mentioned, the data gathering is the thing that often takes the most time. But it's with the LCA part of it now, using software like One Click LCA, it is as efficient as I think it can be. So that reduces the project timing down. I think it's fair to say that it's still sensible to measure it in terms of an entire project from end to end in terms of months rather than weeks, but the majority of that is the primary data gathering phase of the project. So I think that there's a misconception that it has to take 18 months. Doesn't, but and that it's sped up by using software solutions.
And would you say that in certain instances, because it's certainly something that crops up here and there is that companies can miss out on opportunities to get specified without the EPD. Is this quite often occurring when you're producing the EPDs for the clients, that they're benefiting from the production?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things there. There's a we're often asked to produce EPDs where a client has been asked specifically for it, or has been sees things coming down the track and they're being asked for it. So there's an immediate need to have that environmental data. I think also it also avoids the need for potentially a manufacturer losing business in the future as a result of not having one. Their customers perhaps picking another product because they do have environmental data on that product. So I think those two things are key, and yeah, for sure. I mean, it will open up more conversations with potential customers. Just having this environmental data, you can talk about it, and if that leads to specifications in the future, then I think that's only a good thing.
Okay, all right. So what we're going to do now, or now we're going to have a look at how you approach working through the problems to help manufacturers achieve their goals. And so I suppose go straight in with it. How does Blue Marble help simplify and accelerate the EPD and LCA generation?
Okay, great. Yeah, so we approach every EPD project as a project. As a start point, it has an end point, published EPD. It has multiple stages in between with different milestones. And we break it down into 5 different phases. So I thought today I'd just talk through those phases just so it's very clear. And we start with the first phase, which is the kickoff phase. And this is a little flow chart I've got here. It's got various swim lanes for the different parties. So you've got Blue Marble there. You've got the manufacturer, the supplier of the raw materials, the verifier, and the program operator. And we start every project with a kickoff call or kickoff meeting. We can meet face to face if it's in the UK. And the purpose of this is to start to map the product system boundaries. And what we mean by that is effectively the supply chain of the product. And that just gives us a really good understanding of what that supply chain looks like. And from that, we produce a bespoke questionnaire. And we find that that's a really key value-adding activity because we're asking the specific questions that need answers to, and not those that don't. And they're phrased in the language of the manufacturer. And so, if the manufacturer has a welding process, then we're asking questions about the welding process. And if it doesn't, then we're not asking, for data on that. What I've got here as well is kind of some typical questions that we get from the manufacturer at this stage. So one of the questions is, what are the next steps? So we find having that kind of kickoff meeting is a real kind of, it's very clear. This is the start of the project. It's we can, various stakeholders can be involved in that kickoff meeting. One of the questions is, will you speak to our suppliers? We find that actually it works best if we don't. And the reason is that we don't have the authority to get the suppliers to provide data. However, we are on hand throughout the data gathering phase, and we'll often join calls with suppliers, or we'll respond to questions throughout that data gathering phase. Another question is, who needs to be involved? It's generally works best if you've got a point of contact from the manufacturer's side who can act as that point of liaison, and they but if there's various other parties representing different departments within the manufacturing organization, that would be beneficial to have them involved in a kickoff call. And then if the information is confidential, well, as a matter of routine, we sign an NDA with any new client, and And using One Click LCA, there are ways of anonymizing the data as well, making sure that nothing confidential is is inadvertently disclosed or anything like that. So yeah, that's the kind of first phase of the project initiation phase. If I move on to the second phase, then, so this is the data gathering, and at this point, it's mainly the manufacturer's responsibility to gather this data, because they're the ones that have this. And this is nothing. We're not asking the manufacturer to do any additional calculations. It's just to gather data that may already exist. So these are things like transportation distances, mass of certain materials, technical details of those materials, all data that should exist, but perhaps takes a little bit of time to gather. But we're on hand throughout that to engage with suppliers if necessary. We can also, it's very normal to have a few kind of, we produce this bespoke questionnaire, we send it out, it's returned, we can review it, go back with comments. We have a few turns of that to get the data to the point that we need it to be. Again, some questions from manufacturers that we get at that point, which are, for example, I can't get a certain type of data from suppliers. Maybe the supplier is based overseas. Maybe they're not used to providing this data. These are all challenges that are very normal, and we come across them every day. There are always ways around it, and there are, it's often the case that it just takes a little bit more time to get the data if there are challenges around it. The question I've got here is what if I dual source? So this is, again, very normal. Manufacturers may, to reduce risk, have multiple suppliers of the same material. That's absolutely fine, because you look at what you do is your EPD is based on a previous period of time, usually a year, and you just do a weighted average of the different materials that you procured during that time. Then once we've got the data and we're ready to start the LCA modeling, this is the point at which One Click LCA really comes in for us. So I think the first thing I'd say about the One Click LCA software is that it exists. If you remember, I gave an example of some other LCA clients that we have where we don't use One Click LCA. One Click LCA is specifically built to comply with the standards, and the main standard that we follow are the core product category rules, which is EN 15804 plus A2. So really, we're operating within a structure of a software that means that we have to comply with that, which is massively helpful, and it just means that we can really guides our LCA modeling. Some of the other things that we benefit from that are a real benefit of using One Click LCA: when you're doing life cycle assessment, you're dealing with lots of data. You often have to look at the metadata associated with the secondary data you're using from databases, and the ability to search for that data and to filter by what you're looking for is really, really efficient and intuitive in One Click LCA. So that again saves time. There's also there's a feature in One Click LCA, which is the automatic balancing feature, particularly of biogenic carbon and of energy. I won't go into details here about what specifically they are. Needless to say, when you're doing a life cycle assessment, everything has to balance. So what comes in must go out, or has to go somewhere. And it's often a very time-consuming part of doing LCA. That One Click LCA have this feature that speeds that up. There's also other calculation tools that have been developed by One Click LCA, which again help with the LCA modeling. So, for example, within EcoInvent, which is the secondary database that we mainly use, there is no data point for galvanized steel. So you need to model the zinc plating of the steel separately. One Click LCA have developed a tool to support that. So again, that saves time having that. We also get immediate visualization of the results, which is helpful for two main reasons. First of all, when you're doing LCA, it's very easy to make a tiny error. You know, you put the decimal point in the wrong place and all of a sudden everything's multiplied by 10. The visualization of results immediately allows you to see where there may be issues in your life cycle assessment model. And it also means that, you know, for us presenting to our clients, we can visualize the results in very nice looking graphs effectively. So that's really helpful. And then finally, I'd say as well that if you're publishing your EPD with EPD Hub, there's the ability to generate an EPD in Microsoft Word format, and that is one click. And there's a little bit of additional formatting to do to it, but effectively that's a very quick process to actually, once you've done the LCA, actually create the EPD document. So all of that is saving us days of time, basically, you know, versus a you know, the traditional consultancy model. So I think that and that you know, we charge our clients based on the amount of time that we spend, and we pass on that cost saving to our clients. So those are the, you know, main benefits, or some of the main benefits from One Click LCA that I see. Also in the LCA modeling phase, we are just in terms of what Blue Marble are doing then. So we're doing the life cycle assessment modeling. Sometimes it can be very complex, and that's what we specialize in. We're producing a background report for our customers, and we're also briefing our customers on the findings once we've done the LCA modeling. I'll move on to the next phase, which is your EPD document is generated. As a manufacturer, you're happy with that, then it's submitted for verification. Again, with One Click LCA, this process is streamlined. We have, if you're using EPD Hub as the program operator, which is where your EPD is published, you can submit direct to EPD Hub through One Click LCA. If you're using other program operators, there are other compliant tools that One Click LCA have for, you know, the international EPD system, for example. And then we've got a single portal for responding to the verifier, so we're not going backwards and forwards in emails or that sort of thing. So again, it's all time saving. Our role as consultants is we manage the submission to the verifier, and then we respond to the verifier comments. And then some of the typical questions that we get from manufacturers are how long does verification take? Depends which program operator you're using, but I'd say around about 4 weeks in our experience. And then will I get any questions from the verifier? Perhaps. Most of the time the verifier is checking that the LCA model is done correctly, but there may be some assumptions in there that need to be clarified with the manufacturer, or more. Sorry, I think my internet connection dropped there. Hopefully can you hear me again still? Yeah, okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so I was saying that if there's any question, there may be some questions for the manufacturer, likely to be very few. And then the final phase then is the publication of the EPD. So at this point, we're informing all the stakeholders that the EPD is being published, and we also offer training to the manufacturer for their sales teams on what the EPD is, what it means, and how to promote it. And so questions we're getting from the manufacturer then are, how should I publicize this? And we go through that in our training. and then what do the results mean as well. And, you know, at this point, the kind of core manufacturer team that's been involved in the EPD production process are very aware of the results. But, you know, the wider sales team, the wider business, they also need to know about the, you know, the results of the EPD. So those are the 5 phases that we run through. It's quite a procedural approach. We find it works for the project of producing an EPD, and as you can see, you know, the LCA part of it, the LCA modeling and the verification using tools like One Click LCA, it's sped things up enormously.
Very interesting. Yeah, it's good to get into the depth of your result, because I suppose it almost doesn't make a difference which way you're going to be doing an EPD and an LCA. These are the sort of steps that you're going to have to really follow and get stuck into. So that's very clear. And actually continuing on from this, we've got obviously further questions that get into a bit more about the results. And so what kind of results what kind of results have manufacturers seen from using this approach that you've outlined? And I believe I understand that you have a success story, a case study, where this method made a measurable difference that you can share with us.
Yeah. So it's
perfect
on my next slides. So yeah, this is this case study for Q railing. So a little bit about Q railing. So Q railing are a manufacturer of railing systems. They are headquartered in Germany, but they provide their systems globally. The sort of products they produce are, you can see an image there of a stainless steel balustrade with a glass infill, and then on the right, that's a building with a aluminium base channel and glass infill as a balustrade. So we were approached by the UK office, and we were commissioned by the UK office. Historically, they were a supplier of balustrade components, and they had and still do have a very large list of components, so over 5,000 different components. I say historically because increasingly they install and they design balustrade systems, which I'll come on to next. So so these are some of the challenges, let's say, that they were facing when they approached us. And I've got here some the solutions for how we dealt with that. So we have, so the challenges were, we were approached by the UK office, as I mentioned. We had to have, get the buy-in from the German headquarters. So the German headquarters were the actual manufacturers. They coordinated everything. And so they needed to be brought on board. It's worth mentioning as well that the UK office were being asked specifically for EPDs of the products, and the German office less so, I believe. So so we had to kind of make sure the German office was kind of on board with the process. We had there were obviously concerns that they had a very large range, so over 5,000 products, and often they had different finishes or different options associated with each different component. There were tight timescales on the project because they were increasingly being asked for their EPDs. There were concerns about the complexity. They had a complex global supply chain of all these different components. And also the question was asked, well, how applicable is the EPD beyond the UK? Can we use it within our other markets as well? So in terms of the solutions we devised, we had and I've broken this down into different phases that I just mentioned. You remember I mentioned the 5 different phases of an EPD project. So in terms of the kickoff phase, What we ended up doing is we devised a solution for producing averaged EPDs based on 3 different systems. So these are assemblies, highly typical assemblies of those components. We did the averaging based on a worst case in terms of a carbon footprint, worst case product, a midpoint, and a best case product, and then created an averaged EPD from those. And there's a I'm not sure QRailing will acknowledge that's if they are asked for the specific carbon footprint of one particular component, the average EPD won't tell them that. But we can provide that data if they're asked for it. So this was really kind of making going back to one of the questions in the poll. It was about making a start and getting EPDs that cover the most highly typical assembly of components as systems. So that was the solution that we came up with, and that really meant that the German HQ then understood, okay, actually we're not going to have to gather data on 5,000 components. We can look at the different, we can take 3 different systems and average those. So then in terms of the phase 2, the data gathering, we developed our bespoke questionnaire. And then we had, and I remember on this project, we had multiple calls with the manufacturer, and indeed, for example, the purchasing team. We were dealing with a single point of contact, and that point of contact put us in contact with other people within the organization to have calls with around purchasing, and then we could ask about transportation distances and where the materials are coming from. So we supported that element of the data gathering. Then phase 3 was the life cycle assessment. And as I mentioned, we used One Click LCA for that. We did 12 different LCA models. We ran a sensitivity analysis on the effect of powder coating on the results. What this meant, and we included this in the EPD document, it's a little bit of additional information, is it allowed us to show the effect of, the EPDs were for mill finished aluminium product, for example, and we were able to show the effect of coating that with powder coating on the results. So again, using One Click LCA meant that we were able to kind of breeze through that process of doing the LCA modeling. With phase 4, the verification, the verification happened relatively quickly, and we made sure that we turned around our responses very quickly on that, just to make sure that the verification process, we went through that quickly. And then in terms of phase 5, the publication, what we did is we organized a training session for the entire global sales team on how to read and promote the EPDs so that they can have conversations with their individual customers around these EPDs. And the thing around the applicability beyond the UK, we've done these EPDs to comply with European standards, to comply with ISO standards, and so it has global applicability as well. So they were able to use it beyond just the UK office. And then the project end-to-end ran September 2024, and they've only recently been published in February 2025. We've got some good feedback from, so it was Daryl, who was the architectural sales manager in the UK, who commissioned us, and he said this point, which I think is important, that it proved to our current clients that we're doing it, and we will win new business from having done it. Bear in mind, we've only recently published them, and importantly, we'll also secure repeat business from having it. And I think that's the point that you wanted to make, that it satisfied their current clients and meant that their clients or their customers have the environmental data that they now need to be able to do their own calculations for their building LCA. So it's satisfying, current clients and potential future clients as well. So I think that is that's the case study. Back to you, Sam.
Lovely stuff. Yeah. Thank you for that, Sam. And so now it's a good point. What we're going to do is open up the floor to a bit of Q&A. So if anyone at this point, so I know that we've already got some questions that have been asked that we can ask now, but if anyone else in the audience has some questions that they think they can ask now, then that'd be great, and we can go through those. So to start with, let me just get these questions open. So the first one is a question from Yana. It is, what is the current trend in producing EPDs? Are you experiencing a sharp increase with the introduction of the NZC, or the Net Zero Carbon Building Standard, and LCA becoming mandatory for building standards?
I wouldn't say we're experiencing a sharp increase, but we have seen over the last couple of years, yeah, I would say probably a very considerable increase. We are, we used to do more of other types of LCA, but we're seeing increasingly the majority of our LCA work is based on EPDs. The conversations we have with manufacturers, there's the phrase, it's coming down the tracks. They're increasingly being asked about it. They want to be prepared. I've seen a few questions, things have come up regarding the CPR, so the Construction Products Regulation, which is European. But, manufacturers in the UK do supply to Europe. And people are aware that having environmental data is important, and is increasingly going to be important. And if you don't have that environmental data, you're going to be at a disadvantage. An EPD, doing a life cycle assessment is what you do to get the data for an EPD, and you need to get to the point where you've done life cycle assessments on your products for sure.
Sure. Yeah. That's great. I suppose I have some information to add as well, is that there certainly has been an exponential increase of EPDs over the past, I would say, just even 5 years, between or 5 or 6 years, from 2019 to 2024. So a lot of these sorts of statistics will be in the One Click LCA kind of annual report that we produce. And so I know that there is a graph in one of them that outlines the kind of latest uptake of EN 15804 compliant EPDs. And so these would be specifically in Europe. So I think we're just coming over about 25,000 now. And so the graph is very much increasing like this. But I would say certainly market demand is what we hear from manufacturers as being one of the major driving forces. So while absolutely it's important to have regulations, guidance, mandates that enforce people to produce the EPDs, certainly sustainable information is now strategic to businesses, and so therefore I think that's also driving the demand for EPDs, because it's not just the manufacturers themselves that need it, but it's also their clientele. So that would probably be one of the biggest driving forces. So I think we're yet to see whether the Net Zero Carbon Building Standard will have a sharp spike increase, but I'm sure it will. Okay, so the next question, unless you have anything more to add there, Sam? Or...
No.
Okay,
that's good.
Let's move on to the next. And so we've got a question from Brian here, which is the average time from the start of a project to publication of an EPD. So very, very simple.
Okay. Yeah. So if you think about the different phases then that I mentioned earlier, so the kickoff phase, the point to producing that bespoke questionnaire, we do that in a week. The data gathering phase can be done very quickly if you've got the data, or many months. So that really determines the length of the project. but the probably about kind of 8 weeks, let's say, for that phase. The LCA modeling now, because of One Click LCA, it's done in weeks, and then the verification again, weeks as well. So I would say an efficient project end to end, in our experience, is probably you're probably looking at about 4 or 5 months from end to end, from the point of a kickoff call to the point of EPD published. Of course, you can do it in less time, but you have to have the primary data ready to go to be able to do that.
Sure. So we've got another question here, which is actually a good one. So, well, firstly, there's a very quick one, which is, can EPDs be published in languages beyond English? Just very quickly, yes, it can be. So no, I know that One Click LCA do German and Japanese because there was quite a high demand for EPDs there in those languages. I believe French is coming, and over time, obviously, as the demand picks up in the various different regions, then it will. The unfortunate thing is it's not necessarily something that can just be thrown into Google Translate, because there's some technical language that differs from country to country. So it does have to go through a specific process of being translated there. I mean, Sam, have you had experience producing EPDs for any other countries and languages?
For other countries, for sure, not for other languages. But
fine, yeah. Okay. All right. So the question here was, just bear with me to get it open again. Yep. So we've got a question from Mike, and this is quite a good one. I've produced an EPD last year, but would like to understand what more I can do with it and how I can improve the results.
Okay. So yeah, I think that probably the what I was saying around the kind of promoting of it, in terms of the training of the sales team, I'd say make sure that you are your sales team are fully aware of it and can use it, and it's it's on your website, it's that you are really maximizing this asset that you now have. In terms of improving on the results, yeah, so in some ways an EPD can be considered, if it's the first time you've done it, it could be considered a baseline, and the yeah, so you could consider it a baseline, but you can, once you've got that baseline, then you can start to do something about the impact. So you can look at the different modules that you have. So module A1 being the raw materials. Could you introduce more recycled content, for example? Module A2 being the transportation. Could you look at sourcing materials locally? Could you make the product more lightweight? Module A3 being the manufacturing of the product. Various things that you can do at that stage, reducing waste, the packaging, does it need all the packaging that it has on it? So there are kind of interventions that you can make at each of those life cycle stages. Once you've done that modeling, you can look at the impacts. We offer it as a service to our EPD customers, to go into that little bit more deeper dive into what could be done and reductions that could be made into the process. So I think those are some of the things I would say kind of what's next for the EPD. Promote it, make sure everyone is aware of it and promote it, and then look at the interventions you can make.
Yeah, that's very good. The two kind of main aspects for it. And actually on top of that, I would mention through the One Click software, obviously it's a tool that will present sort of results for you so you can gain insights into this. But one very useful aspect that we've developed slightly more recently is to do with, it's called manufacturing pages. And also EPD analytics. And so manufacturer pages will enable you to create the page or on the user interface in which the users of the one-click software will be able to see your products. And so you can attach various other documentation on there, like maybe any kind of fire standards that you're in accordance with, any BIM models that might be useful for people coming across your products. And so you can really tailor this to have direct communication from the users. So One Click currently has just under 90,000 users. So it's the most commonly used lifecycle assessment software for building and infrastructure LCAs all over the world. And so you're able to kind of present your products in the way that you want to this large plethora of users. And then on top of that, with the EPD analytics, you gain insights into how often your EPDs are being either viewed, added to a project, and also included in an LCA report that's being generated. You also see where those EPDs, what countries they're being used in, what project types, what stage the project's at. And so there's a various number of analytics that will give you a good understanding for kind of marketing and sales material to promote your EPDs. And so next we'll move on to a question from Julian here. And so this is quite an interesting one. It's on the sort of slightly more technical side. What is your view on the best, most visible and most credible program operators? Is this a problem? Do you think we can expect harmonization at operator level in the future?
Okay, yeah, this is a good question. I think on the harmonization point, so you may be familiar with Eco Platform, which is the kind of governing body for EPD production in a sense, and program operators are audited by Eco Platform, and they operate to harmonized standards for program operators, and they should be going through that process. I think the credibility of them, I would say that technically we should be following the same. The life cycle assessment should be done to the correct standards, and it should matter less really what the particular general program instructions are of the program operator. I think having a consultant be involved is a good idea. So I think I think there is harmonization in terms of Eco Platform. I think that making sure that the EPDs that you are looking at have been done to the correct standards, the lifecycle assessments have been done to the correct standards, is the thing that should be, determine the accuracy of the EPD.
Okay, great. And so I think we've got a bit more time for a few more questions. We've got one here, which is from Philip. And so is there a straightforward way to compare products when they use different declared units? For example, some window manufacturers might use a declared unit in kilograms or kilograms of CO2 equivalent per kilogram, whilst others may use per meter squared. And so is there a standard unit on EPDs that people can refer to?
Yes. So all EPDs should contain a mass per declared unit figure. So that should be the thing that makes it possible. You have to convert everything to, so if you've got a square meter, you need to know the mass of that square meter. The declared unit is kind of most helpful because you will be, it's sensible to have a declared unit in the unit that the material is supplied or the product is supplied. So it just means it's as easy as possible for the user of the EPD to know, okay, I've got 100 square meters of this product, I'll multiply the results by 100. But yeah, it should disclose the mass per declared unit. So you have to do that additional calculation, but you could do that and get, arrive at a figure that should be comparable.
Okay, great. Next question here is Sam mentioned, so I assume that's going to be you. Sam mentioned that an EPD lasts for 5 years. Is that an average before there is a significant change in the supply chain, or is it definitive? Yeah.
Yeah. So, no, I mean, specific product category rules may require that an EPD is not valid for 5 years. In most cases, it would be valid for 5 years. At the end of the 5 years, the EPD will need to be re-verified. Some program operators have rules which require it to be kind of validated every year, revalidated. You are expected, if the manufacturing process changes, to also update your EPD. Does that answer it? Not sure.
I think so. Yeah. Because I suppose also there's one thing that I know. So this coincides with the next question from Yana, which is who is the verifier? So it's worth pointing out that through One Click LCA we have a connection with the verifier called EPD Hub, or the program operator, and they have a direct connection to the software. So what the result of this is that the verification process is a lot faster. And kind of going back, one question is that there can be circumstances, for example, if you're in a design phase EPD, so if your product hasn't been produced for more than 1 year, then you would have an EPD that's valid for 18 months rather than 5 years. And so I think that's probably it for all the questions that we've got here. And so we'll now finish off with another poll. So just one more, which I believe will jump onto the screen shortly. Does anything come up? There we go. Yeah. And so that would be, if anyone's interested in or you'd like to explore kind of how this approach could support your business, you can just click on the poll here and you can indicate whether you would like to hear more from Blue Marble and Sam McGarrett from Blue Marble about the consultancy support that they can provide you. And then also, if you're potentially interested to find out from One Click LCA about automation tools and how our manufacturer pages can help you get specified more often and things like that, we'll all follow up with more information based on what interest you indicate at this point now. And so thank you to everyone for joining us today, and a big thank you to Sam McGarrett from Blue Marble for sharing your insights. And if you'd like to find out more, please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks very much.